Hi, I'm Megan Melton from EVPL North Park, and welcome to FanFiction 101. Today, we are going to take a fun but brief look at the history of modern fanfiction. Okay, so fanfiction has existed for honestly as long as we've been telling stories. But we don't really have time to dive into what it was like before we had copyright law. Modern fanfiction gets its start in the 1960s with Star Trek. Back before the internet, fans of a property would publish and hand out fanzines, which are unauthorized fan-created magazines. In 1967, the fanzine Spockanalia published what is generally credited as the first pieces of modern fanfiction. And boy did it take off. It wasn't long before other fandoms started publishing their own fics. Interestingly, in the early days of fanfic, the majority of writers were women, LGBTQIA, and people of color. And that was the state of things for the next few decades. Things didn't really change until the internet arrived and took center stage. The 90s and early 2000s were truly the wild west of fanfic and fandom culture in general. Once the internet became available to the public, people started sharing their fics through email lists, dedicated fan sites, and blogs. A lot of these sites and mailing lists were focused on a single fandom, were very private, and hard to get access to. And there was a very good reason for this. See, production companies had a tendency to strike down any site that they thought infringed on their copyright. Most authors were aware of fanfic and ignored it, but putting it online was a cause for concern, especially after 1992, when an issue between author Marion Zimmer Bradley and a fanfic writer caused her to scrap a novel she was working on. So in order to protect their work, many authors tried and succeeded in getting fanfics of their works taken down. Author Anne Rice even had her legal team send cease and desist letters, harass, and sue anyone she found posting fanfiction of her books. So if you've ever wondered why so many fics have disclaimers, this is why. It's also why you shouldn't send an author your fanfic. In 1998, the very first website dedicated solely to fanfiction of all kinds, fanfic.net, was created. It was later followed by other sites, such as Wattpad and FictionPad. These sites grouped fics by fandom and type, and best of all, they weren't hidden. But while these sites were great for finding new and interesting stories and fandoms to interact with, didn't mean your fic was safe. Fics could be removed without warning due to things like too many negative reviews, having LGBTQI themes, sexual content, or any number of puritanical standards of decency. There were even groups of people who made it their mission to get any fic that they didn't like removed. Then, at the beginning of the new millennium, everything changed, for the Harry Potter mania had arrived. Once the Harry Potter series hit the mainstream, the fic sites got a boom of new users and new fics. And that led to people branching out and finding new and older fandoms to join and write in. At this time, the tide had started to turn, and fanfic, and geek culture in general, became cool. It wasn't long before many fanfic writers, such as Cassandra Clare and E.L. James, realized that they could profit off of their stories if they just changed a few things. And thus started the trend of filing off the serial numbers. Fanfic writers would take the story they wrote, change all the names, other identifying information, and whatever they really needed to distance itself from the thing that had already been published, and then publish it as its own unique story. For example, the Mortal Instruments series started out as a Harry Potter fanfic called the Draco Trilogy, and 50 Shades of Grey was a Twilight fic called Master of the Universe, and there are many, many others like them, and it's still an ongoing trend. Then, in 2009, the Wild West era of fanfiction ended, for that was when the Archive of Our Own, AO3, was created. AO3 doesn't remove fanfiction unless it violates copyright law, and by this time, most authors stopped attacking the fanfic writers, partially because the court struck down most of the lawsuits, stating that they weren't copyright infringement, and many authors started to realize how allowing fanfic can benefit them, even some of those who were against it to begin with. Orson Scott Card, author of the Ender's Game series, even told the Wall Street Journal in 2012, "Every piece of fanfiction is an ad for my book. What kind of idiot would I be to want that to disappear?" And that's it for our fun overview of fanfiction history. Thanks for watching, and join us next week for our final video in this series, FanFiction 101, A Beginner's Guide to Writing Fanfiction.